course, you can't talk about inner peace if you don't address really the root cause that often blocks us from inner peace. And that is our fear of what other people think of us. That's our fear of, am I liked? Am I going to be loved? Or the fear that we feel unlovable, whatever it may be, it wraps itself in of other people. And there's this kind of, I need someone else to do something for me to be okay. That's how I was in relationships for a long time. There's a lot of push pull, and there's a lot of us looking out into the world. The world needs to do something, meaning the people in our life, in order for us to be okay. So this process is about reversing it and recognizing that it's not about you, actually. It really isn't. A lot of the times when people react or people say something, or people may say something mean or rude to you, it's often stemming from their own insecurities, unhealed emotions, dramas that they've kind of haven't really revealed or looked at in their own life. It's so important that we can detach by not taking it personal.
Welcome my guest, Shannon Kaiser. She's a world-renowned spiritual and self-love teacher, speaker, and empowerment coach. A best-selling author of 5 books on psychology of happiness and fulfillment, she guides people to awaken and align to their true selves so they can live to their highest potential. Shannon's newest book, Return to You, 11 Spiritual Lessons for Unshakable Inner Peace, is a complete guide to Shannon's most effective strategies for tapping into your innate wisdom and stepping into your true power. Well, I'm so happy to welcome the beautiful Shannon Kaiser. This is such an honor. As before I press record, obviously I'm sharing how much I just love your work and how much I relate to. And it's just my, it's the stuff I love to share personally about alignment, being your authentic self, living your truth, passion, purpose, all that combined, and self-love, all these important topics. So you are the perfect person to talk about this subject because you've written many books based around self-love, alignment, your inner knowing. And now we're going to welcome your newest book, Return to You. I know I'm showing the book. I know it's reversed, but I finished this in like 2 days. It was an easy read for me. I just jammed through it, highlighted the crap out of it because I love it. There's so much wisdom shared in here that is so necessary for people to hear about today. So anyways, thank you for being on this show, Shannon. I appreciate you.
I am so happy to be here. And thank you for that. I like, when I was writing this book, I wanted it to be kind of digestible. And I was really hoping some of my other books, I designed this one and wrote this one in a very different manner. So I'm happy to hear that it resonated so much for you.
Oh, so much, so much. There's so much greatness. So let's go into it. So before we dive into the topic, returning to you, or returning to self, cultivating unshakable inner peace, and then soul alignment, I would love for the listeners to know more about you and what brought you to become an author of now 5 books. This is your 5th, right?
Yeah. And it's out in the world. My 5th book. It's very exciting. I haven't always been doing this work. I feel very driven by this. It feels like my mission to help people awaken and align to their true self. I like to say my purpose is helping you find your purpose. It wasn't always that way though. About a decade ago, I have been doing this work for about a decade. So 5 books in about 9 years. And I was in a completely different career. I was working in advertising, climbing the corporate ladder. And it looked like I had it all. I was working with celebrities, flying all around the world, living in Chicago. But at night, I would cry myself to sleep, and I was addicted to drugs. I was suffering silently from eating disorders. I was in very toxic relationships. It was just a very dark inner world. I would cry myself to sleep every night, thinking that's what it meant to be human. I thought that's what every human did. And I went to my doctor, and she diagnosed me with clinical depression. And at the time, I also was suffering from extreme anxiety. My anxiety sometimes got so bad I would pass out in public places just because I would forget to breathe. So I was kind of scared of life. But what I recognized when I got that diagnosis is it was a very pivotal moment for me and a turning point. It was kind of the whole trajectory of my life changed. I not only went on a spiritual journey, I kind of had a spiritual awakening, but I realized that I wasn't listening to my inner world. I was just doing what the world said was best of, check this off, go here, get this job. But it was killing me, killing my spirit. So I went on an inner journey, and that turned everything around. I heard my inner voice say, follow your heart. And I remember this day so clearly. It was 2009. And every day since then, I have been unapologetic about listening to my heart. And it's led to the most fabulous, rewarding life that is in alignment with who I am. And that's why I feel so passionate about helping others get in alignment. So, Return to You is really the book that brings all of my teaching together and the teachers that have been my mentors as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that raw, honest vulnerability about your journey. And I'm sure a lot of people relate to that, is trying to fit in this box, like society teaches us, like to get the corporate job, to, get married, have a kid, all these things, but we never question, is that our truth? Are we in alignment with that? And so I think a lot of people could relate to that. And I've struggled with depression myself, thinking I love myself, thinking, I knew my self-worth, but that was not really realistically the truth. Until we're faced with these moments where it kind of awakens that we're not living in a true alignment, that's when we really get to see, like, beneath the veil of really our
Yeah.
truth. And it can be hard, but again, that's why this work is here, why we must go on an inner journey to really discover what's our truth and what's in alignment with our values and beliefs. So, talking about the book, Return to You, can you define what this concept means to you?
Yeah, Return to You is our essence. It's about inner peace. So this book is 12 spiritual lessons for unshakable inner peace. But what it really means is who we are free from fear. I feel like we live in this world that it's almost like we come into the world and there's this big veil of fear, whether it's conditioning from our parents or, cultural ideas or even just insecurities that we pick up and learn at a very young age. And so we start piling on more doubt, more fear, more, I can't do that. Who am I to do what I love for a living? All these things that stop us truly from living our most fabulous life, the life we're really meant to live, which is to be in joy, to be in peace, to be in the exploration and adventure of life. So, this book is really a dedication to your true self to shatter away all the illusions that are keeping you from all that you really already are. And it's not about becoming anything, but returning and allowing and showing up in the world. Really, you get to a place of peace because you're being unapologetic. You're no longer living for others. There was this study done, you may have heard of it, in the UK, that was a nurse, and it turned into a book, The Top Regrets of the Dying. The number one regret
I've heard of
is,
that.
I wish I would have lived a life true to myself instead of, living for everyone else, followed by, I wish I allowed myself to be happier. And so I don't want to get to my end of the life, and the people I work with in my coaching practice and the people who read my books, it's like my mission to make sure that we're living each moment as intentionally and as purposeful as we can. And that's really the book's purpose.
Beautiful and so, so needed, especially in the last years, as we know, through the pandemic, through Black Lives Matter movement, like all these things that have happened. And I know you're up in Oregon and you endured the fires. I was here, obviously, when we had the fires down here in Malibu and surrounding areas. And I witnessed what you explained in the book of, like, the sky is just orange, and it's
Yeah.
the most surreal thing to experience. And I love that you share in the book about your story and your experience and kind of your awakening spiritual download that you received from that. Can you
Mhm.
kind of share that? Because I think anybody that's enduring some sort of chaos, it's very
Yeah.
hard to find inner peace because we care about others. We naturally are connected to others. So it's so easy to get wrapped up in the chaos and the drama and the overwhelm, if you want to say. So I'm kind of curious, how does somebody find inner peace in the chaos?
Yeah, really. It's interesting because I set out to write the book and I didn't know how I was going to write that chapter, but all of a sudden the universe kind of showed up with a real natural disaster, just like you, because California, you guys actually experienced it even more so. Oregon's a pretty wet climate. And I wrote this chapter during the time, and the chapter, the lesson is, if you don't go within, you go without. And Oregon is so wet. I had never experienced fires. That's just not really what happens in the Pacific Northwest in America. But it was the worst air quality. Like you said, we had the blood orange sky. People were walking around on top of the pandemic and COVID with the real hardcore masks, like these gas masks kind of things. I was scared to walk my dog. And it was interesting because I fell into panic momentarily And it's because I was kind of resisting and pushing, like, oh my gosh, and I was going to worst case scenarios. And that's what we do. And that's what I mean by fear taking a hold of us and kind of wrapping itself around earth, because especially during natural disasters or, wars going on, we feel helpless. And I quickly caught myself within 5 minutes, 10 minutes of pacing around my house, like, what am I going to do? Starting to freak out, like the fire's coming, watching the little, radar meter.
Yeah.
And I caught myself and I paused. And that's it. It's the power of the pause, because the fear will just run rampant. We'll keep going. But in this moment, I kind of allowed myself to be. And in that space, it wasn't even a formal meditation, but I allowed my inner voice and the higher self to kind of come in. And it said, if you don't go within, you go without. Therefore, the lesson became my inner world needed attention, because I was focusing on the outer world outside and how I had no control over it. And then I recognized that it's important to feel our feelings. I was feeling helpless and I was feeling out of control. I was feeling really worried for people. I had friends and family that had lost their homes because of the fire. But then I got the download, if you will, turn your resistance into assistance. And this was profound for me because I was resisting what was happening. I was like, oh, the fires. And what I mean by that is what's happening in life. Resistance is not accepting what is. We're thinking life needs to look another way, but the truth is this is happening. So, in Eastern philosophies and Buddhism, they kind of talk about surrendering to what is. And then from this place, you can move into action. And this is really the powerful part, love in action. And so I said, okay, I'm not going to resist. This is happening. I accept it. I surrender. How can I help? And I started to go around my house. I started to gather canned goods and I created these care packages. My family came together to help put donations to the, people who had lost their homes. And all of a sudden I started sending money to the firefighters. Like, I became an activist. And I think that's what we need more of right now in the world, is to get out of our own way of fear and worry and say, okay, where do I feel called to help? And it might not look like what your neighbor, your significant other, your family wants to help, but at least you're doing your part to kind of uplift and feel better.
I love that you share that, because this is kind of where I know you have a chapter that talks about purpose and kind of puts all the components together. And this kind of ties into uh, uncovering what your purpose might be. Like, this might be something that whatever like innately comes out of you to want to help, that might be like a little tap, like maybe this is your purpose. Like maybe there's something, obviously if you're passionate about this and you're able to help and you feel joy in doing it, maybe like dig a little further. I think that's really great way to discover your purpose, possibly in
Yeah, this
some
is one
way.
of my favorite principles too. I share this too in the book, The Sacred Activism Concept, right? It's where does your heart pull? There's this chart that I share that's created by the Thrive founders. There's this documentary by Thrive and the Gambles. They created this process. And I reached out to them to ask if I could share their chart. And they were so gracious. They're like, yes. So I put it in the book. And I share this in my coaching practice too. They're sectors, and it's interesting because I feel like sometimes when we want to find our life purpose, I know when I first left advertising, I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know I wanted to be a travel writer or a retreat leader or coach. I had no idea. I just knew what I didn't want to do. And I was stayed stuck in the what is my purpose. Trying so hard to find my purpose kept me from living my purpose.
Yeah.
So another lesson I share in the book, which is probably my favorite chapter, is our purpose is personal expansion. And when we open up to learning more and growing more, we learn the way on the way. And that led me. So my sacred activism, when I first left advertising, I love animals so much
Me
that
too.
I volunteered. Yeah, right. I remember you sharing that. So
Joy.
it's like, so much love when you just cuddle with your furry friends. But I volunteered in an animal shelter, no agenda. I just knew I needed to get out of my own suffering. And I started to wash them and walk them. And then lo and behold, it led to me adopting one. And that love manifested into like becoming my own boss and leaving the corporate world. So it was one step at a time. But the sacred activism is, where do you feel called? Not everyone's going to want to go march on the street and fight for that cause, but maybe they want to send money over here, or maybe they want to just help their neighbor, or, and so in that, my dog, we started to volunteer at animal shelters, or we started to go to senior citizen homes, and he
Mm.
became a care dog. And so it became this movement of love, if you will.
I love that. I'm actually toying around with that right now. I am a big big pit bull advocate, and my dog passed in, I feel like I'm mentioning this a lot on my last recordings. My dog
Oh, I'm
passed
so
over
sorry.
Christmas. So it was relatively recently, and he was my world. And
Yeah,
I have just such a love for pit bulls. And recently I've been thinking about the idea, the same thing, like you said, volunteering in shelters, but also taking it an extra step and becoming literally a pit bull advocate and speaking and standing for the breed. It's just something I'm
amazing,
drawn for. And
amazing.
so I completely relate to that. So
Yes, I wanna see that, like, I see that for you, and that's exactly it. It's in your heart, it comes to you, and often, most of the time, it's inspired by our own personal experience.
yes.
I'm so sorry, it's losing a dog is the hardest, losing, a loved one of any type, but I think that they stay with us in our hearts forever, and so I'm all for that. That's
Yeah.
exactly it, right?
Yeah. Well, so going back to this topic of inner peace, I know one thing I think it's really important to talk about. Again, as we kind of walk through the lessons, I'll kind of see where the conversation goes. But you talk a lot about important of knowing the contrast and being in alignment with your true self. So I would love if you could kind of talk on the importance of knowing the contrast of something. And I love how that you explain this, because I don't think I know you say something in the book along the lines of you need to know. I don't think you say it this way. You need to know the light, or you need to know the dark to know the light. You say some other statement, but knowing the contrast is where you could really truly understand something to go
Yes.
deep.
Yes. In fact, I had been leading workshops and writing for about 8 years. So I was well into my new career, and I was on book tour for my last book, Joy Seeker. It's all about joy. And lo and behold, my anxiety caught up with me again, only it was even more intense. And on my book tour, I'd come home in these hotels and I would have these panic attacks, and they were so debilitating. And I remember when they were happening, because of the work that I've done and because I'm in the spiritual world and because I've done a lot of, inner growth and I teach self-help principles, I was aware enough to know, and the Eastern philosophies often talk about, to know something, you must know the opposite. And the way to is through. And so through the darkness, I think we live in earth. And so many of us think, I hear it all the time with my clients, like, I shouldn't be depressed, or I shouldn't feel down. I shouldn't be anxious. And we put this shame and this guilt over our experiences. And so I never put the shame or guilt over it, because I know that doesn't serve. And I instead asked, well, what is the opposite? If I'm literally having a hard time breathing and I'm having panic attacks and breaking out in these cold sweats, the opposite of anxiety is peace. So maybe
Mm,
I'm in a master school right now of inner peace, because to truly know what inner peace is, my soul has somehow signed up for the opposite. And that became lesson number one of the book. We live in a school called Planet Earth, which is all about whatever we are going through. It is a lesson for us to learn, and we will never be in that space forever. So a lot of times when we're in these dark places, we feel like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to move forward, because we're thinking it's our forever state. And so there's a lot of tools in the book to help us kind of move forward. One is just recognizing that feeling your feelings is important. So I went deep into the anxiety and I allowed myself to go into it. And it didn't last too long. It gave me a lot of insight into what it is that I've been running from in my own life, deep insecurities of losing everything. What if it all goes away? My ego is saying it's all going to go away. Who do you think you are to be happy and enjoy when the world is literally falling apart? That's all fear. Again, that was all in my head. So I
yeah.
had to catch myself and remind myself what is real. I'm here to be of service. I'm here to help be more in the light. And so I truly believe the contrast is not anything we need to run from, but learn from and dive deeper into.
Beautifully said. And I completely agree. And talking about anxiety, it's just like a fire signal. It's there to tell you something is off. It's nothing to, be worried. Like it's nothing that you should put a label on, like you said, shame it. Like, why do I have anxiety, depression, all these things? Because it's there to show you that there's something underneath that needs to be
Mm.
addressed. There's always a root cause to the anxiety, suffering, burnout. Like, so doing the inner work
Yes.
is so important. It's a lifelong journey. And what I love about what you share is you were on this tour. This is your fourth book, The Joy Seeker,
Mm. Mm.
sharing joy. And of course, you know this from experience. You're teaching it for a reason, but you're human. You're on this planet Earth learning like us. And so what's really important is for people to recognize that everybody is human. We're all on this journey. It's not something like we arrive. We're
Yeah.
constantly learning things to bring us to our higher self. And I think that's what's so important to know, like this work, this journey in life, it's meant to serve us lessons. And so that's why it's
Mhm.
so great that you share the spiritual lessons, and a lot of them resonate really deeply and well. And I just appreciate so much. So going
Yeah,
deeper
thank
into,
you.
yeah. So going into deeper into that, how does somebody really go inward, do the inner
Yeah.
work?
The inner work, I think the work itself sounds a little bit intimidating if you're not into personal growth or spirituality, and it feels like, it feels scary. And this is often when the addictions or I like to call it the overs, the overworking out, the over
Mm,
spending, the over analyzing, like we're always overing our feelings. The inner work is as simple as feeling your feelings and allowing yourself to be where you are instead of where your mind or your ego or the world thinks you should be. When we're talking about anxiety or stress or depression, like for example, anxiety, and I share this, one of my favorite quotes in the book is, this is what I went through. It's not trying to limit us, it's trying to free us from aspects of our life that no longer feel good. And so if we kind of put that idea over the inner work is trying to free us from aspects that we've outgrown, which is, we have seasons to our soul. I share that in the book too, that where we are is where we're supposed to be, and thinking we're supposed to be somewhere else is really what's causing the most stress. So if we can just take off that shame and that guilt by allowing ourselves to be okay, there's great learning right here. It opens so much up. And also, I think a lot of the times we're trying so hard to get there, and then we get there and we realize, oh, whether it's that accolade, whether it's that job title, whether it's that perfect relationship, perfect body, it's fleeting. And so return to you. I had to sit down and write this book too, because it really comes back down to, you are enough as you are. Absolutely. I think with all my work, it comes back to self-love and realizing that these things, my anxiety was a lot in the beginning before I wrote the book, putting my worth into my job title, into the bestseller status, into the coach, like the world traveler. And then, COVID hit, and all of a sudden, all my world travels fell away. And I had to really look at, who am I without all that stuff the world tells us we need to be. So the inner work can be very rewarding. It's beautiful. It does lead to peace. I truly am sitting here feeling more peaceful than I have
yeah.
in so long. So it's about, but I just had a moment last week where I was super anxious again, and I was having fear come up, and I looked at it, I addressed it. I didn't run from it. I didn't over anything over it. I just sat with it. It lasted for about a couple days, and I learned from it, and now I'm at a new level. So I think that's how we can look at our life.
Beautiful, because I think that's true, that we shouldn't judge our feelings. We should be able to
Mm.
sit with it and address it in a way, like get curious, like, why am I feeling burnt out or anxiety? Like for me, if I'm like work, and I'm never out in nature, or if I'm missing workouts, like I know that's going to throw me off. And so if I'm irritable,
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, because I haven't worked out in 2 days. Like,
Mhm.
so it's just being very keenly aware of what strips your energy and what gives you energy. And then you could obviously, once you have that awareness, then you can make the change and go a different
Yes,
direction. So that's super key. And
I agree.
talking about, because I love how you share the seasons of life, how it is very much similar to the seasons of nature. And
Mm.
since we're in the season of spring, which is I think spring is one of the best seasons of life, if you want to say
Mhm.
like the
Mm.
metaphor for life. And I would love, since we're in the season of spring, if you could kind of share, because we can't walk through all the seasons as you share in the book, but the season of spring, what is it meant to teach us? What is it meant to serve us? And how we could step
Yeah.
into spring?
The seasons of your soul is one of I say this with every lesson, right? It's one of my favorite lessons, because I think it's something, sometimes when we experience things, we feel like we're off track, but it's just our soul being in a season. And they don't always align to the seasons, even though you say we're in spring here, in the northern
Right.
hemisphere. But you could be going through a winter or even a fall when the outside world is spring.
Mhm.
But spring, I am finding a lot of us right now are really in spring, because literally what the world has just gone through.
Right.
We've kind of been in a dormant winter, this kind of it's almost depressing if you're trying to resist, you're trying to push forward, but you can't. How many plans did we make that fell through because the world was just so we went through for 2 years. So spring is so beautiful because it's an awakening, it's a rebirth, it's like the flowering of the trees. When this relates to for our soul, it's literally, I call it the activation, the realization, because you're coming out of a dormancy, a hibernation. If your soul, if you kind of look at it as an energetic experience. So a lot of the times in winter, we're feeling kind of nothing's really, we're not motivated. We're feeling a little bit like we need rest. Spring is when you start planting the seeds, like the garden, the farm. And then what you're doing, the questions you can ask, which are so beautiful, is what is falling away? What is emerging? What is being like one of the questions you can ask? I like journal questions. So there's quite a few presented throughout the book,
Yes.
but in the seasons, in this one, it's like, what is coming alive for me? Like, where is my heart calling me? And a beautiful question you can ask is, what is opening up? And as you start following these little breadcrumbs, for example, maybe it's like, I really want to take a trip, but maybe I really want to go somewhere. And you start to plan. And as you plan, it becomes easy and it flows and it leads you right into summer, which is the actualization, full on living your most authentic aligned self. And then of course it's a cycle. So we roll back into fall. And that's where a lot of the disharmony comes because we're expecting to stay in summer forever. I
Yeah.
worked so hard to get here. And then it cycles in. So I love the seasons of your soul. And spring feels
Yes.
so good. I'm in spring too. It feels good.
Yeah, I am too. And exactly. I think it's great that we need to know that we are continuously going through seasons, that nothing is permanent. I think that's really important to know that, like, even if you're in winter of your soul and it seems heavy and dark or, trying, it's not going to last forever. You're meant to move into the next thing. It's just like you said, especially in this book, you do ask a lot of, you give a lot of journaling prompts and you give a lot of resources. And actually, I would love to talk about, before I forget to mention this, one of your resources is the intuitive test you could take. You say there's different intuitive styles. So talking about asking yourself these certain questions is getting really in tune with your intuition. And intuition is so powerful. And I think being in tune with your intuition, your inner knowing, your soul connection, if you want to say, is critical. And the way we are not connected, or what limits us from being connected, is all the noise, right? All the noise of the outside world. And the only way is by tuning that out and going, being still, being with yourself and able to connect with your inner knowing. So can you go into the intuition styles and kind of like share a little bit of that?
Would love to. In fact, I realized I can't write a book about inner peace if we're not talking about intuition,
True.
because our intuition leads us to inner peace. So even working with my publisher, they're like, this is a guide, a step-by-step guide for intuition development. And it really is, because I realized I had to really develop a stronger sense of intuition. And I have been leading retreats for several years, and I have a self-love retreat. And one of the tools that I use is a quiz to help you find your intuition. But I've also made that quiz available in this book, and now it's available on my website, Play with the World. But just for people listening and watching, there's a whole fun quiz of lots of questions, but we all have a way that our intuition talks to us, a unique style, if you will. So just for example, one of the questions that you could ask yourself, let's say you just watched a really good movie and you're going to tell your friend. So think about a movie that you've recently watched, maybe on Netflix or something, and you're like, that was so good. And you tell someone about it. So what do you say though? A would be the scenery. You remember the photography, the nature scenes, the visual costumes. Or B, the soundtrack. Maybe as the movie's going, you're really into the scenes with the songs. Maybe your whole music download library is full of soundtracks. Maybe it's C, how you feel. Maybe you were right there with the actors, feeling alongside them. And D would be maybe the storyline. So you tell them, oh my gosh, the storyline, the acting was phenomenal. So these are signatures to our signature style. And I find that we overlap, but we usually have a dominant. Of course, you can take the full quiz. It's in lesson 2 of the book or on the website. But just for anyone listening and watching, if you answered mostly A, the scenery, actually, what's yours? Do you know what yours was?
Like I was trying to remember in the book, I did highlight it. I believe, and I can't remember if it was mostly B or I know D was a prominent one, but I can't remember if it was B and C, which one was more.
Yeah, see, they do
Yeah.
overlap. Yeah. So when I go through the answers, maybe it'll remind you. But we have, so if it was A for people, the scenery, the cinematography, this means that you are a clear seer, or often called clairvoyant. You see mind's eyes in your mind's eye. Maybe you talk to people and you say, I see what you mean, and this
Yeah.
is also, you're showing that you recognize. B would be, and this is the one that my dominant one is, clear hearing. That's why pivotal moments in my life, I heard follow your heart. I heard these clear moments, right? You're not going crazy. It's actually your clairaudient. Your inner voice is talking to you through an auditory. Maybe you learn best. You love podcasts because you like to listen. And then there's also the C, which is clairsentient, and this is clear feeler. Maybe that's the one you might relate to too.
Yeah.
Your intuitive messages come to you through your feelings. You literally will. Empaths really pick up on this. Sensitive souls pick up on this. Maybe you feel drained after being in a large group. You sense energy, all of that. And then of course there's
I was
D.
seeing it was C and D.
That's
Yes.
what I thought for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then D, there's clear knowing, which is clair cognizant. This one is actually, so this is my second one. And for many years, I actually think a lot of my depression was because I wasn't honoring my own knowing. How can you honor knowing if you don't realize it's your intuition? Like, it's a knowing. It's not grounded in anything. You didn't hear anything. You didn't see anything. So this one's really powerful once you learn. You just have an awareness and a knowing. It's that voice that says, don't turn left, go right. It's that inner knowing that says, it's time to move, time to start a new venture, time to break up, time to get married, all those things. So honoring this is so important. And one of my favorite things that I've done in this book is also add tools. So depending on which style you are, there's little activities you can do, such as journaling or work with a friend to help improve the intuition style. Because I think, how cool would it be if every one of us starts to activate our intuition more? We're just going to be unstoppable with our authenticity because we have discernment. We know what's real for true.
Yeah. And how would you recommend people start to, as we all know, meditation's a good way to obviously connecting with ourselves, but
Yeah.
what else do you recommend in the book that are some of the ways we could deepen our intuition and really just connect with our soul and self?
I think one of the really empowering ways is to start to trust it. And in order to trust it, you give yourself permission to try it out. So let's say you decide to take the quiz, or just even from what I've just shared, you're like, wow, I must be this type, and I hear something or I know it. Next time that intuition, you start to be aware, like shine a spotlight on it, flashlight. And as you're aware of it, you start to listen to it and honor it. And as you do this, because our confidence is built through the process. So the more action we take, the more confident we get. So the more you start to listen to your intuition, the more confident you start to realize, oh, my intuition is right. Because your intuition is always truth. It does not lie to you. It's the
Mm.
ego and the fear and the mind that lies to us. And that's why we're so used to thinking my intuition isn't true, because the ego, the mind, the fear part of us is trying to talk us out of listening to. And the intuition is your heart. So really it's about dropping from your head to your heart. But there are tangible ways. So that's kind of the larger, umbrella way, start to practice. But there's journaling. There's a journal exercise in there. There's also, depending on which style, you can look at a picture and start feeling into the energy of the
Mm.
picture. Maybe you pull a picture of your grandmother or something like that. So they're real fun activities. I'm all about activities, journals, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I could tell from the book. It's great. There's so much. I love how you laid it out. Like I said, even at the end of the book, I think if I recall, you even recapped the whole entire book. You put your meditations, your prayers,
Yeah.
mantra. Like it's
I really wanted to
amazing.
do
Yeah.
that because in my other books, I haven't done that, but I thought how
Mm.
important to, almost like a book club book, or the whole resource session in the back, there's downloadable meditations. We all learn in different ways too, right? So I think having, whether it's journal questions or quizzes or mantras, I'm all about activation. It's nice to read something, but I really like transformation. And I think transformation happens in the process. And so when we start to take these principles, put them into life, It's how I live my life. And so return to you is like really me returning to myself, but also, and that's why it's more of a spiritual book. It's more of a
Yeah.
book about kind of just recognizing we belong in this world, even though the world often tries to tell us that you have to change to fit in. No, we can be who we are and let the world fit to us.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, I'm sure many people have heard of the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, and you touch on that one of the four agreements, which is don't take things personally, and
Mhm.
talking about everybody has their own style, everybody's also on their own path. And I think it's
Mhm.
important we talk about that, so many of us focus like, oh, that person's talking about me. Oh, that person thinks this of me. And we're reflecting and projecting all these things, but really people generally are thinking about themselves, how they feel. And,
Mhm. Yeah.
so as, we project that, we're concerned about how we look, how we feel. So
That's
I would love if
true.
you could kind of talk about that, how everybody is on their own path.
Yes, everyone is. This is a lesson that I think is really important because, of course, you can't talk about inner peace if you don't address really the root cause that often blocks us from inner peace. And that is our fear of what other people think of us. That's our fear of, am I liked? Am I going to be loved? Or the fear that we feel unlovable, whatever it may be, it wraps itself in of other people. And there's this kind of, I need someone else to do something for me to be okay. That's how I was in relationships for a long time. There's a lot of push pull, and there's a lot of us looking out into the world. The world needs to do something, meaning the people in our life, in order for us to be okay. So
Yeah.
this process is about reversing it and recognizing that it's not about you, actually. It really isn't. A lot of the times when people react or people say something or people may say something mean or rude to you, it's often stemming from their own insecurities, unhealed emotions, dramas that they've kind of haven't really revealed or looked at in their own life. It's so important that we can detach by not taking it personal, right? Just like you said with the principle, the four principles, it once we start doing this, it's so beautiful because we're not taking things personal because we realize we're in our sovereign self and we know what's true for us and we know who we are and we know, between us and our higher power, and we know what's real. And there was a situation in as I was writing the book where there was this person on social media who was like spreading rumors publicly about me and saying I was this person I wasn't. It was very weird because I was like, this is so left field, but they are so convinced that this is their
Wow.
truth.
Yeah.
And I think we see this in social media a lot too. There's a lot of things under the guise of disinformation, but what we have to recognize is what is true for me. Just because someone has a different belief or someone has a different version, that was their truth. There was no amount of negotiating with this person. They thought I was
Wow.
like a crazy evil person because I had a blue check and I write books in personal development, and they thought all personal development was culty, all this stuff. It was crazy. It was a hard time until I started to realize that this is about them. This has nothing to do with me. And there is actually in the Course in Miracles, there is, in my defenseless list, my safety lays. And I realized the more we try to push out and defend ourselves, the more it escalates situations. So if
Yeah.
someone says something mean about you, it's not about you at all. Just say, God bless you, go on your way. And this
Yeah.
this situation healed in my life. It rapidly disintegrated. They stopped bullying me online, if you will. And it turned into a situation where I recognized peace can happen no matter what is going on outside of you, because peace is
Mm.
within you. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think it's important to, I think a lot of people don't even know what their truth is. It
Mhm.
seems like a lot of people don't think about the important things, like what do you really value? You know, what makes you feel most alive? Like, I think it's really important for people to, and I think all the journal prompts you have in the book kind of walks people to find their truth, find their alignment, like who is their authentic self, who is their true self. And so, and of course, I love how you name the title Return to You, because it's not like you said, becoming this other person, it's returning back to your soul, your essence, your true essence of who you are. And so I think that, doing the inner work, it's important because I think you need to know, like, what is your truth? Because once you're attached, once not attached, that's the wrong word. Once you know your truth, once you like deep seated, like that is my truth, the outside noise is like, doesn't affect you as much.
Good.
Like you
Yeah.
said, you find this inner peace, like, Okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that's
That's your
exactly it. I
problem.
will yeah, yeah, you go on with your bad self.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
it's actually the journey you go on. I even wrote this book in a way, and that's why when you get to lesson, 9 and 10 and 11, you start to realize, like, I share a story where we were living in 2020, 2021 through some of the most crazy times, not only with the worldwide health situation, but the political
Mm,
environment, the like you said, there's just the Black Lives Matter, so many deep cultural things
so
and
many
so
things.
much contingency between people needing to be right. And what you recognize is that it's not about trying to prove anything. And I think we collectively, as a human race, are also growing and learning. I share in the beginning of the book, one of the reasons I had to write the book right now is because we're collectively shifting into what astrologers and mystics and shamans of the years have predicted. They call it the age of, I call it the age of intuition, but the age of, we're awakening basically, and as we enter into this new era, it's important to honor who you are because who you are matters and the world needs who you are. And so it's just about activating that true self and not being scared of who you are, but realizing you belong. It's really about belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And so uh, I'm sure many people know that the opposite of love is fear. It's not hate. And it's a choice. Like it's a choice every day to lead your life in either love or fear. Obviously, if we're not even intentionally leading our life, then usually it's directed into fear because our brain is meant to keep us safe. So somebody that is feeling overwhelmed, chaos, and they just feel disconnected from their self, how could they ensure they're being intentional and leading more with love? Like what would you say to that person that is feeling that and being more intentional with their life?
Yeah, I think this is really the key in the direction of the whole book and the work. I think what's really important first and foremost is to recognize where you are. It's important to recognize where you are because sometimes we don't even know that we're operating and making choices from fear. And there was a point in my journey too when the fires were happening in the pandemic and I was just feeling very trapped. That tends to be a theme throughout my life. Like I want to go be free out in the world. And I felt like all restrictions were coming in. And I called one of my friends and there's a passage I share in the book that says, don't, and she passed on to me, don't make any choice in fear. Always know you're right where you're supposed to be. And in this place, just recognize that peace is available to you when you choose love. And how we know is, so I would say to anyone who's really suffering right now, because I've been there, I go in those spaces, and fear breeds more fear. Every time you make a choice in fear, it's going to, as Paul Selig says, give you more. And so I was like, I need to move out of Oregon. There's fires. I can't be here. It was like
Mm,
frantic energy. And that frantic energy doesn't solve anything. It just brings more chaos. So what we want to do is that same thing is just look at how can I relax into the moment. Sometimes it's taking a breath, like a breath. Sometimes it's like journaling. But really what I say is look at your fear and really recognize it. Because if we run over it or we try to do things to escape it, it's just going to stay. It's kind of like that double-edged sword. So I'm not one for spiritual bypassing or saying it, you hear like feel your way, focus on good feelings. Like if
mm,
you do that when you're in that fear state, it's impossible. It's like listening to a foreign language. So with my lifetime of knowing what it's like to be in depression and suffering from anxiety, what you have to do is go into it. And it sounds scary, but when you go into it, you move through it
yeah.
and it will find profound healing. And there's a lot of tools to go into it, such as listening to music, letting yourself cry. When's the last time you cried for the state of the world? And then it's these things that you give yourself permission in the moment because we're human, and being human and being returned to you is about feeling all of the layers of life. And that's truly, I believe, what leads a really gorgeous life because we will bounce out of it and we will rise through into a state of peace and love. But making your choices from love feels a lot better, a lot better. And so that can be our set point. Once you learn how good it feels to be expanded versus restricted, then you start making more choices and it's almost like a lifestyle.
Yeah, and then you know what aligned life feels like. Like
That's it.
when you're aligned. Like, I
Yes.
mean, when you feel that heaviness, fear, or overwhelm, that means something's off of alignment. So it's
That's
just being
it.
super
Right.
in tune with your feelings and just going deep with yourself. I love how
I
you
think
share
one of
that.
just with that too, as you're sharing that, one of the very, if you just want like a quick takeaway, is to detach from drama. If we're
Mm.
in it, a lot of the times we're staying in this fear because look at what you're consuming. What you consume is going to consume you. So if you're watching a lot of the news or you're listening to your neighbor who's talking about the worldwide craziness, that's going to cause more anxiety. So I say detach from drama as the very first step, because that means that we're giving our power, what we give our power to is going to take over. So if you're looking at things in a doomsday prediction, then that's what you'll get more of. And so it's look at empowering yourself. What can you do to live your life today in joy? What can you do? And when the pandemic first started, I went out into the grass and grounded myself every day. I need nature. We were talking about this before we got
Yes.
on. The beach, nature, forests, like let me connect to earth. And that saved me for having panic attacks and anxiety. So do what you can as you can.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that's important that you mentioned detach from drama. I don't think people realize like how much, like, I think people are unconscious of how much it really affects them. And I remember you shared, uh, obviously I'm returning to the book a lot, but you share
Love
in the
it. That's
book how, oh, you were talking to a friend about politics, or I think it was about the elections. And I remember specifically a time that I was up in Lake Tahoe and I was with a friend and her friends. It wasn't my friends that I was connected to, but they were having a little debate over, I think, veganism and also the presidential election. And they got in a whole conversation. And I made one comment, just my opinion, whatever. And one of the girls wanted to challenge me and going back and forth. I'm like, I'm not, this is my perspective. This is what I feel. Then that's yours. I don't want to go into a debate. And she kept on pressing and pressing and pressing. I'm like, I'm just letting you know, I have no desire to battle with you. It's just not like I'm here like Tahoe. I just want to be peaceful. And so
yes,
I
yes,
literally said, I'm like, I'm going to step away. I'm going to go in the room and go read and go meditate. And I removed myself from the situation because I was choosing my inner peace. I
yes.
wasn't
That's
going to
exactly
debate.
it.
Like it's
Yeah.
choosing, sometimes I think people have a fear of insulting other people by choosing their peace. And so,
Mhm.
like, I'm sure you've heard many people listening, tossing around the word protect your peace. And I think that's important that we have to realize it's not rude to say like I choose peace, I choose my
Yeah,
inner peace. And so I think we do have to protect it. It's sacred, right?
absolutely.
So yeah.
I think with that too, it's so interesting because that's a representation of what so many people are going through. We saw so much contention and fighting on social media and with fights. It's like people we know, we saw new sides of them. And I don't think that this needed to pull us away from people, but it did. My circle of friends looks very different than it did before. But to share what you're sharing is so important because it is about coming back to what's true for us and not needing to declare or demand. And I share that in the book too. You rest in your knowing. You no longer need to know anything else. I think one thing that I love is the principle from the Gambles too. They talked about one of the things, Kimberly Gamble, her grandmother, this is one of my favorite stories in the whole book. She was well into her 90s, almost 100. And she said, grandmother, how did you make it through? She went through the Depression, multiple world wars. And she said, honestly, you have to just be open-minded, open heart, and be willing to try on an idea. And as you try on an idea, you try it on like clothes. It doesn't have to fit, but you try it on. And that's something I did early on during what we've experienced, where if I started following other people who had a different president they voted for because I wanted to understand them. I started to become friends with more people instead of judging them for their beliefs. Like, we are all human. Our beliefs don't have to define us. So that was important what you shared too. You protected your peace. And some people are so needing others to see it their way because they think that will bring them peace, but it's actually not what it really will. What will is us having loving allowance for each person to be who they are. And that's from
Yeah.
Dr. Peebles and Summer Bacon. Like, that's truly, if there was one thing I think we could all move forward with, it's let's accept each other for who we are as we are, respect each other. That's it. That's going to
Yeah.
give us all peace.
Yeah, because nobody's going to like everything we like or have the same opinions. Like how dare you think that be the truth? I mean, and that's what's beautiful is we're all unique and we do have our own views. It's not to cut somebody down, or in the other way is seeking validation for somebody to approve you for your opinion. And that's when you get disconnected to from your authentic self, when you seek that validation, which we all do in some regard, but it's really checking in. We covered so much. I could go so much deeper.
So great.
There's one thing I want to, because I think this is important, because I don't think people realize how critical it is to forgive others, but especially forgive ourselves. Yeah. In this journey, in this trying time, in our seasons of our soul, we will endure hard things, but to find true inner peace, there has to be forgiveness, forgiveness of others of their wrongdoing. Because if you're not forgiving somebody, it's really like you're carrying the weight on your shoulders. It's not harming them, it's harming you, that weight. And also, of course, forgiveness of ourselves for, being a bitch to somebody or telling somebody off, or, absolutely all these things. It's like what holds us back from truly having inner peace, I believe, is not forgiving others and ourselves. So I'd love if you could share kind of something on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was writing the book on inner peace, and it became so clear that you can't have a process for inner peace if you don't talk about forgiveness. And I think what I see a lot in my coaching practice and my retreats is we always, in self-help circles, right? We always talk about forgiveness. I forgive someone else, and it's the very Zen spiritual thing to do. But I think what gets overlooked is the forgiveness for self. I have learned time and time again that the things that are often blocking us is the shame and guilt we're putting on ourselves. I should have done better. I should have known better. We ruminate over past mistakes, or we think we're not where we're supposed to be. All of this is keeping us. And so from really truly living in peace. But when it comes to forgiveness, it really is about just being aware of the barriers within you that are restricting, that are resisting. Because sometimes it's like the word forgive in itself has kind of this connotation that comes with it. So if it feels like, I've been trying to forgive, or just say, I'm willing to live my life in new ways with more love. I'm willing to see myself with more compassion. I'm willing to show up for myself today with more love. And I think that in itself moves you into a place of radical compassion, which is Tara Bach's idea. And that's what we want, more compassion for self. Because forgiveness does it, we've heard it, but it truly does set you free.
Oh, yes. All right. So I would love to know, I know you have a new Oracle deck, which is the Unshakable Inner Peace. I've actually never worked with Oracle cards. Am I saying it right? I'm not even saying it right.
I like it. Oracle. I like that. It's Oracle, but I'll
Oracle.
Take it.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not even saying it right. I know. I've never worked with them. So
can we pull one for
what are these? What are these cards? Yes, let's do it if you have time.
Well, what's really interesting is I was a designer in advertising before I left to do all the work I do today. And this Oracle deck is very special to me because when I was having my anxiety attacks, one of the things that came to me is, anxiety is trying to free you from aspects of your life that aren't aligned. And I realized I had walked away from design, but that was because I didn't want the corporate career, but I still love designing. So I sat down to make these little collages, and the collages turned into, for people watching, they turned into these little designs. And they became my piece. They became like my little sanctuary. So each one is a mini little message. And Oracle cards are different than like tarot cards or anything, because Oracle cards are, the creator can create them in a way and put, there's animal Oracle cards, there's nature Oracle cards. It's about just getting guidance from cards in the moment. It's all energy. So the way I like to work with Oracle cards, I created this deck called Unshakable Inner Peace, which is such a partner to the book, Return to You. There's literally principles in both. And when we worked together with the publisher, I'm just shuffling them right now. So that's what you do. You just kind of we work together to have them be kind of a set, of course, each tool works on its own, but all you do is little message. And so I'm going to ask for everyone listening and watching, what guidance do we need from our higher self, from the universe, from whatever you believe in, you put it in there. Maybe you just want to tap into the moment. And whatever, there's these cards that are like jumpers, or cards that all you do is feel into which card. This is actually the very first card I designed. So it's very special because of the whole deck. It's my Sedona inspired card. I had just gotten back from a trip to Sedona.
That's nice.
And so what we have is the beautiful red rocks, this person who's standing on the road. So you look at this and you just feel into the energy. And then the message is what's really important. What comes up for you when you hear this? It says, you are the image maker. What you focus on manifests. So this is the card about manifesting. And I always like questions. So I have a journal question. Not all oracle cards do, but for this particular card, it says, what thought pattern do you need to shift? So we can manifest by shifting our thought pattern. So yeah, it's really fun. That's a fun way to get daily tools for guidance, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, so I definitely will be including that in the show notes. And of course, her newest book, Return to You, which, like I said, I read this, and I think I told you that I read it in like a couple days. I highlighted everything.
I love the highlight. I love
highlighting
too.
Yeah. So everybody, that will be in the show notes, of course, and of course, a link to her previous 4 books. And are you offering anything else? Do you have retreats coming up, or where could people best learn about you, find you, follow you, and all that jazz?
I am all over the place. So on social media, Shannon Kaiser Writes, WRITES. That's my author pages. And I do have a retreat that I'm actually leading in at Clairaudience on the East Coast this July. Return to You. I'm going to be doing a workshop with Sheriana Boyle. And so that's a weekend retreat. I am also doing some online coaching. Anyways, you can go to my website, playwiththeworld.com, and get more information on any of that. I'd love to stay connected to people.
Amazing. And I know one of those things you do offer on your website is you actually teach people how to launch their own book themselves and guide them on that journey, since you've been doing it for 10 years now and you've birthed a lot of books. So I was intrigued by that. So I'm sure anybody that's listening that is inspired to write a book, if there's a book in you, Shannon could guide you along. So everything will be in the show notes, of course. So in closure, I always ask my guests a final question. I know you've shared so much wisdom, but if you were to share one piece of wisdom, a life lesson, and it's funny because this whole book and this whole podcast is about life lessons, but one piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you feel anybody needs to hear right now, what would that closing message be?
I'm going to go with one of my favorite mantras, favorite quotes that I put in almost all my books is, we learn the way on the way. And so just take the step that's right in front of you today. It will give you more clarity. It doesn't have to look like anything more than where you are. So we learn the way on the way. So where is your heart guiding you today?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. Shannon, this has been such an honor. You're such a beautiful soul. And I love, your mission in the world is so needed, and everybody needs to hear this. And I think really over the last couple of years, as you said, we're having this big awakening, and it's really teaching us like what's in alignment with our true authentic self. And the more people that get in alignment with that, the more beautiful and more love there'll be in the world. So thank you for everything you're doing today and your beautiful books. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great being here with you.